Hello, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to speak about my favorite topic, which is stuff. So I'm going to, give you a little bit of a tour of the world, and then give you my thoughts about changing that world materially. Okay, so this is just an introduction to stuff, because actually it's sometimes difficult to discuss this subject because it seems difficult to get hold of. What do I mean materials? So this is a picture outside my old lab in London, and this is where I used to wait for the bus. And in waiting for the bus, which in London, as you know, often takes some time, I would just count materials. I know it's geeky, it's deeply sad. The thing is, I'm in a job where this is allowed. This is actually encouraged. So I found my place, which is great. And buses take quite a long time in London. The thing is, when you do this, you don't just kind of, from a material scientist point of view, you don't just sort of feel, gosh, aren't we good? But you realize really that, of course, that's the ages of civilization are named after materials. Yeah, this is so fundamental to us as humans. There's the Stone Age. And if you don't get out of the Stone Age, you're still a monkey, right? And then you get through the Metal Ages, and then all these other materials come along, and that's the thing. Like, every time humans had a problem, every time we had a desire, every time we had just wanted to change things up a bit, we invented a new material. And the other thing you realize when you look at a picture like this is, you take those away, and we're naked. We're naked in a muddy field. Just take a look at you. Take a look around the place now. This wouldn't be such a fun event in that situation. So, clothes, for instance. Clothes, they're not just sort of, tools of sexual selection. They're not just a status symbol. They're not just about warmth and keeping dry. They are the thing the sensual stuff that kind of is our outer skin. They're as part of us. So we've done this to the world, right? We've made a new world, a completely different world, and that's full of stuff. And we've solved things like toothache. I don't know how many people have been to the dentist recently, but that is a palace of amazing materials, and they stuff them in your mouth. And if they didn't stuff them in your mouth, you would be in absolute agony now. Because in the past that's what happened. Toothache, the only way to solve it was to pull the tooth out, and it wasn't an easy thing to solve. So anyway, here we are. We're the beneficiaries of thousands of years of developing new materials, and it's our world. Now you might ask, well, how do they work? Like, what is the difference between an amalgam and a ceramic and a wood and polystyrene? And they're just names and things. And so this is a map of the world in the same way, but this is the way that material scientists see the world, and this is also the way in which we create new materials. And I'll just take you through the map. It's a map of everything, but it's slightly different from a normal map. You might look at the globe or that picture, but at the top is big stuff, and then it goes smaller, 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 smaller. So what we've worked out is that the world is made of stuff, but that's at different scales of stuff. And there's two sides to this diagram. One is the living side, living materials, and the other is non-living. Now, in the living side, we have big stuff like trees and whales and mice and fleas on the mice and hairs on the fleas. So as you get smaller and smaller, you recognize these structures, right? This is a tissue. Like, your skin is a tissue, many different cell types, your brain, your liver. What's incredible is that if you zoom in even further, that you get single cells, and they are the Lego of the living world. Everything is made out of cells. You started as a single cell, the whale did, the mouse did, a flower does. And so you can take a cell and you can make it into a tooth. You can take a cell and you can make it into a bit of skin. It's happening now in your body. That's an incredible trick, right? We can't do that. Human technology cannot do that. If you try and work out how it works, you go inside cells, you find that cells are full of machines. These machines are molecules, hundreds of atoms, millions of atoms big, macromolecules, proteins, carbohydrates. They self-assemble. Like, no one tells them what to do, they assemble themselves. That's very deeply impressive. If you look further, you see a nucleus in the middle, and you'll find that this DNA codes for those cells. So the molecules, in a sense, are coded here. They create themselves by some process that we're still trying to work out, and there are many, many people doing this around the world. They create cells, cells create tissue, tissue create all these different structures, and then you are you, living, breathing person who can do stuff, fall in love. This is because you're a multi-dimensional person, right? You have different dimensions of your being. You have an atomic dimension, you have a cellular dimension, you have a tissue dimension. And different things happen at these different dimensions, so you're not aware of them, but otherwise you wouldn't be you. So you're a complex assemblage. Now, where's life? If you scratch your head and say, where does life exist there? It's hard to say. No one really knows, right? All of this stuff obeys the laws of physics and chemistry. There's no magic extra thing that divides this side from this side. Now, this is the side that we've made. Now, we've made rockets and cars and mobile phones, and if you zoom in, you'll find little wires. If you zoom in further, and you'll find little machines. So the machine that tells your phone which way up is, if you switch your phone and it flips, right? It knows which way up it is an actual mechanical machine, but its feature size is smaller than a hair of a flea. This costs 1p. Right? It's cheap, and we can make them by the millionth. Easy, totally easy now. Zoom in further, and you'll find actually a lot of the machinery inside stuff, like mountains or steel or your phone, is made of crystals. And those crystals look like this under the microscope, and it looks a bit cellular, actually. And actually, it is sort of. And if you change how those crystals talk to each other, you change the strength of the material, you change the toughness, you change the electrical, you change the magnetic field. And so this is very powerful, and this is how we had jet engines. The reason we can fly around the world is because we mastered this scale of structure. So birds can fly, we can fly, but we're not as good as nature yet. If you zoom further in, you find that inside those cells, inside those crystals, are all sorts of other little machines that make metals behave the way they do, make rocks behave the way concrete, and so on. And you can change it. And if you change it, you get different properties up here. So we have this paradigm where we can fiddle at these very tiny scales, nanoscale, atomic scale. We've worked it all out. So this has been very powerful. And this is why there are so many materials around you. It's why you have a phone in your pocket that can talk to anyone. The whole of the silicon revolution is understanding that we can make single crystals of silicon. The silicon chip itself is down here. This is what's happened. So it's incredibly powerful, this knowledge. So if you want to change the world, make new stuff, go to Mars, or do anything, you need to understand this map. Okay, so what can we do with it? Well, I think the biggest problem we've got is global warming. And pretty much probably everyone agrees. It's not a nice to have. It's an absolute essential that we sort it out. This is just a flow of emissions, and see, energy accounts for a lot of it, but land change use also accounts for a lot of it, and a lot of that is agriculture and meat eating. And so we've got a lot of work to do to change. Look at this. This is all material stuff. This is making materials, making edible materials. It's creating infrastructure. You know, if you really look at the economy of the world and what creates CO2 emissions, it's us and our love of stuff, wanting houses, transport, heating, cooling, phones. So we have to move all of this out of that CO2 emissions category. How do we do it? Well, one of the ways, of course, is actually to harvest energy a different way. And again, it's a material solution. So we want buildings in the future to harvest energy directly from the sun. And this is a building covered with solar cells. Maybe it's a rudimentary technology, but you know, this is what we think the future will be. And when you look at a solar cell and you look at a solar cell array, what we're trying to do now is scale solar cells up from an initial unit. You see fields of them, don't you now? China has got the most enormous versions of these. But actually, a lot of the action of making this work and weaning ourselves off petrol and diesel and aviation fuel is going to be down here at the nanostructure, because just making many, many more of them won't solve the problem. We need to make them much cheaper, and that means changing their nanostructure, but we also need to make them more efficient. And so we need to understand the microstructure, we need to understand the nanostructure of new solar cell materials. Batteries and things like carbon technology are also hugely important. If you see what's happened in our lifetime, the planes that you fly on now are not made of metal anymore. They're made of carbon. Why? Because it's much lighter per weight. It's stronger per weight and stiffer per weight. So we now have carbon planes. Tesla makes its cars out of carbon for the same reason. You have to use the energy better, so you need a lighter car. Bikes going with the carbon way, and this is what carbon fiber looks like under the microscope. It's fibers of carbon, you knew that. But actually, there's some new forms of carbon down here which have been discovered. This is graphene, 2010 Nobel Prize. This is nanotubes of carbon, which is even earlier than graphene. What people can't do at the moment, because these have orders of magnitude better properties than this stuff that we make planes out of. But what people can't do at the moment is make a plane using graphene. They can't make a car using graphene. But if we could, you have a factor of 10 better efficiency. So this is a huge challenge, working out how to scale these products and materials, which are in the nanoscale now, but need to be the size of planes and cars. The stuff I'm working on takes it one stage further. If you look at life and living stuff, it's amazing. Not only can they make a tooth and a bone and a piece of wood, but they can heal themselves. And what we are making is trying to make materials for roads, for bridges, for tunnels that heal themselves. So the reason why that's important is because with climate change will come enormous amounts of damage to our infrastructure. And it's not going to get better this century, even if we would stop emitting carbon now. We are in for a rough ride. And we rely, all of our health systems, all of our transport systems, all of your lives rely on good transport systems and infrastructure. But that's going to take a bashing. And so our vision of the future is to make that infrastructure heal itself. You think it sounds crazy, but it already exists. There's already self-healing concrete. And in fact, that is the direction of travel, that the city of the future is more likely to be more like a forest. You don't feel freaked out when you walk in a forest. You can go camping in the forest. The forest looks after itself. It's a much more efficient way of building stuff. So a living infrastructure is where we're going. But the other thing that we need to sort out is complexity. If you've got a smartphone in your pocket now, this is a picture of the periodic table. These are all the elements that we know exist, and we've done a good job, as I was saying before, in kind of working out what they are. All the colored ones are in your phone. So you have more than half the periodic table in your phone. Each one of those are mined somewhere. Each one of those is a whole supply chain. It's an enormously impressive achievement, the smartphone. But lifetime of smartphones is about 18 months. The business model of the people who make the smartphones is to make you consume them more. We can't sustain this. This is unsustainable. The ones that are orange rather than red are yellow. They are hard to get to, expensive. Gold, platinum, palladium, iridium, cobalt, slave labor involved, child slave labor involved. It's not good enough. So we need to not just create amazing technology, but we need to create ethical and non-polluting amazing technology. That's what really amazing technology is. It really frustrates me when I get the latest adverts for phones. The best smartphone ever. If it's not sustainable, it's not a good smartphone in my view. This is a bulb of just lighting up the lights. These are all the elements in it. How many of them, you ask, are retrieved at the end of the life? None. That's mercury. It says on the packet, don't put it in the bin. And the reason is because when the glass breaks, the mercury vapor goes into the atmosphere and poisons you and everyone else. But no one does anything about collecting them. Weird. Plastic is the epitome of this. It's not the worst example, it's just the most visible example, the most appalling example, because it floats. If all plastic sank, we wouldn't do anything about this, is my guess. Right? It's because it floats. Not all plastic floats, by the way. Most of the plastic's at the bottom of the ocean. This is just the stuff you can see. And this is driven by greed, but it's also driven by just thoughtlessness. It's thoughtlessness of the material manufacturers, it's thoughtlessness of the product manufacturers, it's thoughtlessness of all of us, because we've all basically signed up to a material world where we haven't really thought about the end of life of our smartphone, the end of life of a piece of packaging. So we've got to change the whole way in which we make stuff. We've got to make sure that everything we make, at the moment, we dig stuff out of the ground, we make something, and we put it into a dump, or we burn it, or it ends up in the sea. And everything we make from now on needs to be repairable, reusable, recyclable. Every single thing. Your clothes, right? Your packaging of your materials, your smartphone, your laptop, your car, your phone, your everything. And that, to me, that if we achieve that, we will really be doing everyone a favor, because this is also the way to change CO2 emissions. So just to say, this is the map of the future from producing new stuff, but it's very complicated. What nature has done is created a very complicated system that is fully recyclable. What we have done is created an incredibly complicated system with amazing things that is in almost no way recyclable. That's where we need to move to. So, how do we do it? My one final parting remark about how to do this is that what we have done really well in the 20th century is concentrate on silos of knowledge: material science, chemistry, physics, art, architecture, computer science. What we've done really badly is bringing them together and to talk about holistic solutions. And that's what we need to do more of. That is really the key. And the key then is that we need to include historians and gardeners and chefs and biologists and everyone who deals with stuff, everyone who makes it, everyone who uses it, everyone who knows something about it. If we're going to make artificial meat substitutes and wean ourselves off of eating meat, which is a major CO2 emitter, we need to work with chefs, right? We need to work with farmers. But we will have to make new materials for that. So I'll finish by saying the way we work at the Institute of Making is that we assemble these groups of people. We never start a project, the Self-Healing Cities is a good example, where we don't have the humanities involved, we don't have makers, we don't have medics, we don't have artists involved, because they understand complex systems better than scientists, is my experience. Anyway, I'll end there because I'm run out of time. Thank you very much for listening.